Any question regarding your meditation in your daily life? Are you more mindful? Are you more happy? Are you more able to let go? Now these are the signs for you to notice as you meditate. Are you less easily agitated? So these are the signposts that you know how far your meditation has improved. It is good to notice them. Are you more quiet? Are there every now and then you have a surge of joy? For no reason, joy appears in your mind as a sign of samadhi. It's a sign that the concentration is good. These are little signs that tells you that you're on the right path. So you have to be mindful to try to recognize these signs so that it gives you confidence, gives you joy that the meditation is good, that you've come to certain improvements in your life. So we have to try to notice this mind and body. As you get involved with daily life, you get very involved, absorbed into all these activities that you do in daily life. You should also take note of the internal, this mind and body. What's happening to it? What is the reaction to it? So whatever we do, there's a reaction to it. And if you meditate, you get into a good concentration, then there'll be a reaction to it. And you see the signs. So as I continue on the subject of concentration, today I'll cover some of the signs, some of the characteristics that when the mind is concentrated, you start to see its behavior, start to change in your mind. Of course, it is a change for better. It's a change for better. Become more peaceful, more calm, less disturbed, more able to take object. So I come across these scriptures and listed are the 16 signs, 16 marks where you can use it as a measurement. And of course, there are these different degree of concentration. So the deeper the degree of concentration, the more clearer is the sign. You can see it more, you can experience it more clearly, more apparent. And of course, the benefits is there when you experience them. Now listed in the first signs that the mind is concentrated is it is non-moving. Non-moving means it is still, it is quiet, it is peaceful when you meditate. When you gain concentration, and it's very still, which the Buddha described as a candlelight, not moving. A candlelight, where there's no slightest wind. It's just a light, it is just burning. But it's very still, very quiet. And of course, the mind stays with the object, whether it is with your mindfulness object or it is in the samatha object, 40 thoughts by the Buddha. Just stay there, and it's quiet. And in the case of our vipassana object, our rising, falling, or feeling, or mind, it just stays still and not moving. So when you have this type of mental state, then you know that you have developed concentration. And Another sign that when it is strong, the mind goes inwards, that you become less and less the attention, less and less going outside, attention going inside. And as the attention slowly not bothering about your hearing, then as you get inside, the hearing starts to disappear. Not because the hearing is not there, not because the sound is not there. The sound is still there, still existing. But because the attention is not there, so there's no more sound. The meditators then, when the mind becomes very still and quiet, he do not hear sound. Do not hear sound. And of course, when he closes his eyes, he do not see objects as well. And so he does not see objects, not disturbed by objects, seeing objects or smelling objects, or even the touching, the body feeling. Meditator no longer notice the body feeling, the itchiness, the pain, the tension, the hardness. It just stay with the object that the mind focus on. The mind focus on the wind element, you stay with the wind element. Focus on the earth element, it stays with the earth element and not the wind element. So the degree of concentration, when it is not that strong, then you still notice a lot of other objects. As the mind focus on rise and fall, you still notice the sound. Every now and then, you can hear certain loud sound. Or then he could smell, but then he let go, and he could feel the body. Sometimes he could feel the body, itchiness a bit, or pain a bit, things like that. But as the concentration gathers, becomes strong, these no longer affect the mind really. It is just a passing object, just a passing object. Just note it, and goes back to the meditation object. And when it gets in and in and in, the mind becomes very still. Stillness in the sense that it could get into absorption. Just stay with the object. You could get abstraction. You could get into jhana, mental absorption. But in our case, as our object is moving, like I mentioned last week, that why is that we would not get into the jhana? Is because our object is moving. It is different. It's constantly moving. So we do not get into the absorption because we have a moving object. Unless you stay with the objects, that is only stagnant. But if it's moving, so your mind cannot stay still enough to be totally still, 100% still. So that is why we need to notice the moving object, so we would not get into the jhana. Why is that we do not want to get in? Because you could get, when you stay in the jhana, you get so much joy and happiness, you would not want to come out. So that actually is why when we are wisdom meditator, we do not want to get in. Otherwise, absorption is a fantastic mental state. It's pure, totally very pure. Stay there for a long time. It has a very fantastic happiness and joy, and is continuously experiencing long period of happiness. But we do not want to get in because the mind will not want to come out into the wisdom meditation, because we cannot get very still when we do wisdom meditation, but still enough to see this mind and body. So this concentration that we need to develop as well in the wisdom meditation. Now, as I've told you before, these cetasikas, these mental states, they are totally different. They're not the same, mindfulness and ekakata. And it arises, like I said before, ekakata must arise in every consciousness. Every time we think of something, we have a thought. There is this ekakata, but does not mean that there will be this mindfulness. If it is unwholesome path. But if it is wholesome path, then definitely there must be this mindfulness. But it is ekakata, it is not concentrated yet. It is not considered as concentration mind. Even though mindfulness is there, ekakata is there, but it is not considered to be a concentration mind because the ekakata has not developed into samadhi. Now I like to use different words so that you could understand more clearly. Then we call it samadhi. So in the scripture too, there are different words used to try to separate them. Even though they do appear the same, but to separate them because there's a distinction, there's a difference. When ekakata develops, when the mind stays one-pointedness in the object, then arises samadhi, peacefulness, calmness, tranquility. But because we do not have these realities, samadhi cetasikas, we don't have a mental state that arises called calmness. So we use this ekakata, this reality, one-pointedness of mind as samadhi, as calmness, as peacefulness. So this is a very deep and profound subject, and you would get confused if you are not a meditator and you do not go into the patipati, you do not go into the practice, and when you stay only in concept, then that is where you get very confused because it is different, it is not the same. But again, it's used different word, and sometimes you say it is the same because there is no reality existing as calmness of mind. There is no this mental state called calmness of mind. It is a concept. In reality, is ekakata, and therefore it is developed when the mindfulness is developed. Now, if you understand this clearly, it is very, very beneficial for your meditation, for your practice. Once you are able to differentiate them, you will not be confused. Helps you in your meditation because you could understand them clearly, the difference. And you will not trap in concept and get confused, and it obstructs your practice. Once you do not have the right understanding, you do not have the right knowing, and in your practice you get stuck. You can't practice well, you get confused because difficulties is unbalanced. You have not developed enough knowledge to walk the way that you don't get lost. So if you don't have enough knowledge, as you practice, you could get lost or you could get stagnant. You don't really understand what you're doing. So there are two different mental states. They are not the same, mindfulness and ekakata, one-pointedness of mind, and yet concentration depends on mindfulness to build up. So when one grabs onto concentration, like one who practices samatha meditation, and he has experienced certain level of calmness, and the greed arises in him, they keep wanting the calmness of mind. They say, oh, it's so peaceful, it's so calm, it's so full of joy. And then the mind tries to cling on to the calmness when it is lost. It is no longer wholesome. When there is this cleaning arises in the mind is no longer wholesome. The mind is no longer concentrated. It is just that cleaning to the concentrated mind. And so it gets very, very disturbed and agitated when it's disturbed. And somebody disturbed, somebody make noise, somebody knock at his door when he's meditating in the room. He gets very disturbed and he explodes like an explosion, atom bomb. He gets very angry. And so it is very dangerous. He could harm another person at that spur of a moment when he's filled with anger because somebody has disturbed his concentration, disturb his samadhi, disturb his peace of mind. But the fact is, his mind is not concentrated. If his mind is concentrated, he would not be disturbed by the object. Even people scold him, he would not be disturbed. But because his mind is not concentrated and he's clinging to that concentrated mind, he thought that he is concentrated, but he is not. He is what? He's having a lot of craving, unwholesome mind, craving to the concentrated mind. That is why the practice of samatha meditation has that problem. People who practice samatha meditation without a proper teacher. One moment they are very peaceful and calm, the next moment they explode like an atom bomb. So that is one of the reasons that one should practice, hold on to concentration, must be very mindful that they do not fall into such type of hindrances. Do not cling on to the concentration, because clinging on to the concentration is a hindrance. He won't produce concentration. He needs to develop mindfulness, continuous, taking the object continuously, the samatha object. And when he takes the object continuously, then the concentration develops, ekaggata develops, and therefore the samadhi appears by itself. It appears. Why? Because when the mind is wholesome concentration, when the mind has that wholesome concentration, the defilements cannot disturb. The hindrances cannot arise in the mind. And when hindrances cannot arise in the mind, because of that concentration, then the mind becomes peaceful. So when we say we develop peacefulness of mind, no, it arises by itself when the ekaggata is developed. So when we say we cultivate samadhi, we cultivate calmness of mind. What actually do we cultivate? We cultivated one-pointedness of mind. And once we come to a certain level of cultivation, or the one-pointedness of mind has developed to a certain level, samadhi appears. It appears by itself. The mind is concentrated, samadhi appears. You don't cultivate samadhi, you cultivate concentration, ekaggata. Could you see the difference? It is easy to say that we cultivate samatha meditation, cultivate samadhi, tranquility, we cultivate wisdom. But we don't cultivate samadhi, cultivate ekaggata, concentration. The mind is concentrated, the hindrances suppressed, there appears samadhi. So this is the way of development of the peacefulness of mind. We call it samadhi. It is a very profound subject. If you practice it, You come to realize it, develop this wisdom, to realize it, how the mind works. So when your mind is non-moving, is staying with the object, then if you are sitting, try not to move. Right? Try not to do standing meditation or walking meditation. Stay on sitting. Doesn't matter whether it is 1 hour or 2 hours, 3 hours. Do not break the momentum. To break the momentum, you may not be able to bring the mind back to that stillness. When it's disturbed, when the mind spread out, it is no longer on one-pointedness. Because when you start walking, then you start to experience a lot of objects. And when the object gets into the mind, the concentration, the one-pointedness of mind starts to spread out, noting the object, and thereby the concentration falls away. Then you've got to build up the momentum again. You do the walking meditation, or standing meditation, or lying down meditation. So he asked me this question, Brother James, when the mind is concentrated, can we still do walking meditation? Yes and no. Yes is when the mind is not really that deep into concentration. When the mind is really very deep in concentration, you can't walk. You can't walk. You can't walk. Because the mind is still, you cannot walk. Then how can one gain enlightenment by walking meditation? When you get into concentration and you can't walk. Because in the instant, realization is just a snap of the finger. In the instant, as you walk and you get into excess concentration and you get into Makapala. Just one step. But if you don't get into enlightenment and you are getting into the absorption, when you get into deep level of samadhi, mind can refuse to walk. Because the mind refuses to think. And walking means thinking. Lifting, pushing. The mind tells the body, lifting, pushing. When the mind refuses to tell you to lift and push, you can't walk. You stay still. Then what must I do? He asked me. Brother James, then what can I do then? When I get into this samadhi, when I can't walk? Away, sit down. Put your hand on the stomach. Get a moving object. Don't stay still. Because you stay still, then you can't see the 3 characteristics of mind and body. Get a moving object. Stay still. Don't just sit there and experience the stillness of mind. Because some of the meditators, they get themselves into that peace of mind. Get stuck in the mental peace. Meditators enjoy the peace. It's so fantastic. I'm just still and no object. So still and peaceful. And then in that peacefulness, they get remnants of the joy keep arising in the mind like a bubble coming out. And they could experience something like jhana, but they are not jhana. Because when they get into jhana, then it's different. And it is totally joy and piti and sukha. Joy and happiness. And they could really experience these 2 mental states, keep on arising non-stop. But because they are not getting into the absorption, they are only getting into certain levels of strong concentration and stillness, but not the absorption. And in that stillness, they could experience the joy, like a bubble comes out and disappears. And it comes out and disappears. So peaceful and serene, and it is still. And some meditators anchor, they take it as an object. And of course, when they take the stillness of mind, it is an object, it is samatha meditation. So there is one type of meditation in the 40 types of samatha meditation. Stillness of mind is the object. The object is stillness of mind. So they take the stillness of mind. but they go nowhere. They do not get into jhana, neither do they get into insight. So there are samatha meditation that neither go to the absorption nor realization. Not all samatha meditation get into jhana. Some samatha meditation do not get into jhana, absorption. No, it does not get in. Neither do we get into wisdom. No, they just stay still. So just go to assess concentration, the various degree of assess concentration, and it just stay there. But very happy, if you're very peaceful, very serene, like you feel very hot, and suddenly you go to a very cool place, and just sit there, and you just enjoy the coolness, the place. Like a very hot under the sun, and you find a very shady tree, big shady tree, a very huge one. And as you go into the shade, you start to feel very blissful and you enjoy it. And you get into the middle of the shade and you sit down and you enjoy that coolness of the branches and where no sunlight can penetrate through. Now that is that mental state of mind when we are sealed from the burning of the defilements. The defilements produces heat element in our mind, and so also it produces heat element in our body. Defilement produces that. When there's a lot of craving and there's a lot of desire and a lot of attachment in our mind, our body builds up heat. We could get sick, we could get fever. When you have a lot of hatred and anger and ill will, yes, we could not sleep. We build up a lot of heat in our mind and body, and sometimes it breaks out into blister. Yes, because of the heat. Builds up blister around your lips, blister on your inside your mouth, and sometimes it builds up measles, builds up a lot of all these pimples and all that. It's a heat element. When you can't sleep at night, you have a lot of desire, a lot of anger, frustration, sadness, you can't sleep at night. They build up a lot of heat in the mind and produce too much heat in the body and you get sick. But in samadhi, when the mind gets concentrated and cooling and peace, you get a lot of mental health, physical health, and get a lot of happiness, coolness of mind. And the Buddha says that the shelter from defilements, when the mind is concentrated, they have this shelter. They're very cool, shelter from the burning of defilements. These are the benefits of a concentrated mind, because it has these characteristics, and when the mind concentrated, you could see the difference, you could experience the state of mind which is so different. When the mind falls into defilements, the mind gets into a lot of heat, elements produced by defilements. It helps you to compare, it helps you to recognize them. Such types of characteristics in the scriptures helps you to recognize it when you are in meditation, and when there is concentration, when there is absence of concentration, which the Buddha always say, there is this knowing whether the mind is peaceful or knowing when the mind is not peaceful. Why do the Buddha say that? Because it helps you to recognize them, to differentiate what is this concentration, what is when this mind is not concentrated. The meditator also knows. Why must the meditator knows? Because he's able to differentiate and recognize, and able to say this is good, so I want this, it is good, so I need to meditate to get into the calmness because it is good. So this knowing in the faculties is very important. The knowing through listening, through analyzing, to spacious reasoning, which is the basic, the very basic, the beginning of knowing, the pariyati, the learning. But you must get into the patipati, the knowing of the experience knowledge, where you get into the practice and your knowing develops into a stronger knowing, because this time it is not just from learning, from listening, but this knowing is through the experience, and you really know, and you say, now I know because I experienced this difference between a concentrated mind and a non-concentrated mind. And one day comes to the penetration, and you realize the third level of knowing, and you realize after you experience it, and comes the realization that it is so, it is true, it is the way to enlightenment, knowing. The penetration. Now there's this degree of knowing, and it needs to be balanced in the five faculties. If it is not balanced, that it will not lead to penetration. Then after the knowing, it needs to balance with the others. Concentration needs to balance with the faith, needs to balance with the energy. We shall go deeper into this subject later on, after this concentration. It is unrelated. And we have the second signs. It is unrelated. What is this unrelated? A mind that do not constantly related. What is the meaning of that? What is a related mind? Related mind is it keeps on relating to objects. Jumping from object to object is a related mind. It is like a relative, and the grandfather, the father, the son, the grandchildren. The mind keeps on relating to objects, and once we think about these, then it goes into these, and goes into these, and it's a form of restlessness. It's a form of the mind constantly relating to objects, one object after another, related to the past, related to the future, and the present objects start anchoring and relating to things. From a job, then it jumps on to the boss, from the boss it jumps on to your salary, and it goes on to your bonus, and top. So you know that the mind is not concentrated, the mind is restless, it's moving all the time. So a mind that is unrelated, when you are in concentration, it does not move on to objects and objects. And when you meditate, you become aware that the mind keeps going to so many objects. Then you still feel pain, and you feel itchiness, you feel restless. Then you start hearing sound, and then you start smelling, and some even start tasting. You find a lot of taste in your meditation. You say, oh, that's very sour. You say, oh, very sweet. It keeps on going and going. It does not stay still in one object. So it is unrelated. When you gain certain level of concentration, and you find that the mind is not so jumpy, right? It's not so jumpy, jumping from the senses to senses, and is unbending, which is the third characteristics. What means that? Means that it is unbending, means it is not easily going towards defilement. It's unbending. So when you talk about concentration, again you're talking about mindfulness. You become very mindful, you're not easily disturbed, you don't keep on bending towards your smelling, tasting, touching, that produces defilement. Bending, that you get so One moment you are peaceful, next moment you get angry, next moment comes the grieving, the next moment you are in a state of moha, state of ignorance. The mind is easily bending, persuaded, easily influenced. So it is called bending. Right? A strong mind is not easily influenced, it's not so easily disturbed, because it has a mind that is unbending. It is like a big tree, oak tree, and not easily bended. It's always stable, staying near, because it is deep-rooted. What is it? Deep-rooted in concentration. Right? Unoffending mind. What do you mean by unoffending mind? Because when the mind concentrated, it has mindfulness, and it knows the object. As the object touches the mind, it just dropped. Unoffending. It drops like I always say, the feather of a duck. When the water is sprayed to the duck, feathers, it cannot stay there. It just falls away. Now a mind that is concentrated, it has that peacefulness and calmness. It is not easily offended. So it is called an offended mind. And offending mind. Not easily offended. Not easily disturbed, not easily influenced. Not only it does not offend internally, it does not offend externally. Offending mind is not easily getting into, is not always hit back at people when people criticize, then he hit back. It's called an offending mind that does not want to be like that, does not want to be disturbed, does not want to be scolded, does not want to be this, wanted to be there. Offending. They see something he doesn't like, hear something he doesn't like, smell something he doesn't like, think something he doesn't like. So you know that this mind is not concentrated, in a sense that it is not mindful. Not mindful. Obviously it is not mindful, so it has no concentration. That's a measurement. It's a very good measurement. When you know that when the mind is easily offended, they are not mindful, therefore the mind is not strong. Meaning the mind is weak. Even though you say, I meditated 1 hour every day. But when you're so easily offended, obviously there is no concentration. It is not built up. The mindfulness is not strong enough to build up the concentration. So it's an offending mind. Internally offended and offending other people as well. It is a very good mark to compare whether we have developed much and we have good strong concentration. If not, we don't get disturbed, we don't get agitated, we don't keep blaming ourselves. We just knowing. We bring out that knowing, because that knowing is important for us in our development of enlightenment. We must know, which I always say, when you meditate, do you know that the mind is there in rising, falling? Do you know it is not there, it is thinking? Do you know? Yes, you know, it is thinking, but I don't know what I think, but I know I'm thinking. Okay, if I don't know, I cannot see what I'm thinking, then I go back to my rising and falling. Then I know now my mind is with my rising and falling. Do you know? Yes, knowing. Because that knowing is going to build up into your penetration. If there is no knowing, then you're lacking in knowing. There is faculties, it's not built up, it is not balanced. Then you can't penetrate. Wisdom do not arise. So you need to be knowing. Be knowing, and this knowing through theory could go into your practice, pati knowing. When you build it up, it's going to get into the Pativeda. It's going to get into penetration, insight. So do not be, oh my gosh, my meditation is practiced so hard, so long, and it's not improving. Don't say that. Every time you know, you are improving. Whether it is there or it is not there, then you're practicing noting the mind, 16 types of mind. Then you know how strong is your mind, which mental state is strong, which mental state is weak. Then you know which mental state needs to be cultivated, needs to develop, and which mental state you have to look out, to be careful, so that it does not weaken your concentration. The Noble Eightfold Path, that is why it takes us so long to reach Makkapala, because it is not just mere belief, it's a lot of effort put into it to build up your mindfulness. Only when your mindfulness is strong, it builds up concentration. And only when that knowing becomes strong, you won't go astray, you won't get into absorption, you won't go into the wrong path. You need to build up the mindfulness. So where these are the 5 faculties needs to be there. And the most important of all, you need to have faith. If you have a lot of doubts, do not have faith that they're able to walk this path, that they're able to get into realization, enlightenment, and it falls along the path. Buddha say like the lotus flower. Some as it goes up, before it can reach the surface, become rotten, eaten up by the turtle, the tortoise. Then there is no salvation. There will be no realization. And some go halfway, yet become rotten and eaten up. And some, before they reach the surface, they get eaten, they get become rotten. But there are those with a lot of effort, a lot of faith, keeps on moving, even if they don't see the lights at the end of the tunnel, but they have a very strong faith that I keep moving in this path, in this direction, but where all the noble walk, where all the Buddhas walk this path, and I'm walking the same path, and I would also become, even though you're not a Buddha, I will be an Arahant, because this is the path that all noble Arahants and Buddhas and Pachika Buddhas has to walk this path. So you could consider yourself very lucky that you are walking this path. Should be like that faith. Without faith, all is lost. You constantly got to brush up your faith, because it's an important part of the 5 faculties. Without faith, all is lost. And only faith is not enough. You need to brush up your wisdom, got to listen, got to learn, got to analyze, got to have your spacious reasoning. Is this right? Is this wrong? Am I following the right path? Am I following the wrong path? Buddha talked about concentration, peacefulness and calmness. Do I get there? Do I experience it? Talking about wisdom. Do I have the wisdom? Do I have the knowing? Am I mindful? Now these are the signposts for you to recognize as you practice your meditation or as you walk the Noble Eightfold Path. You need wisdom. You need wisdom to recognize that. Independent mind. Fifth one says independent mind. Independent mind, where there is concentration, does not rely on, does not rely on fear, for example. A weak mind, a helpless mind, a dependent mind, very dependent on something, for example. For example, a teacher, very dependent on a teacher, but it can't be helped. Beginners has to be very dependent on a teacher, because a teacher has a strong mind, and so depend on a teacher to guide. But make sure you depend on the right teacher, because you yourself is weak, and you must have a strong teacher, a right teacher. If you depend on a wrong teacher, then happy is gone, leads you to the wrong path. It's very important, because a concentrated mind is independent, because when you reach to a certain stage of your meditation, you become very independent. You don't keep on chasing after teachers. No. This teacher is good, you chase his teacher. That teacher is good, you chase his teacher. But you do not, at the end of the day, you don't really know which teacher is good. Everybody say, this is good, you chase. That is good, you chase. And you keep on chasing. Why? Because the mind is weak. Mind is dependent. Anybody say it's good, you go. That is a sign that the mind is not strong enough. But of course, it is unavoidable. You need a beginning. But I do not say that you do chase after teachers or you must not chase after teacher. No. Sometimes it is good to go to various teachers, but you should be independent in the sense that you are not easily influenced. When people say he's good, means he's good. And because you are dependent on what the other person say, even though the teacher is no good, because other people say good, then it is good. So an independent mind is strong. It is not fearful, not easily develop fear, and is not so reliant or so dependent, so clinging on to a teacher or to someone. When the mind is very clinging, it shows a very strong attachment, a sign of very strong attachment. So it is not good. A very strong attachment because produce a lot of fear, suspicious mind, fearful mind. Is a sign of a clinging mind. So it is not a sign of a strong concentration mind. Strong is a sign of a clinging mind. Again, I do not say that you should not cling to a teacher. I do not say that. What I'm just explaining is just a sign of a concentrated mind, that it is independent, and it is independent because it is strong, can stand on its own, can differentiate, can know whether it is the way or it is not the way. But for beginners, you need to depend on to a certain degree, but not totally depending on, in case it is not the right teacher. But if it is the right teacher, then you are fortunate. Meet with the right teacher, and you depended on him, in a sense that you have faith in him, and you could get a lot of things, a lot of knowledge and experience. Even if you don't experience yourself, you get a lot of knowledge from your teacher if you have that faith. If you do not have that faith, you don't go far. You believe a little bit, you don't believe a little bit, you believe a lot, you don't believe a lot. At the end of the day, you don't really go far. So people with strong faith in the Buddha just have 4 lines and they are enlightened. But of course, he's the Buddha. And of course, it's their good karma to come into contact with the Buddha. That is different. And of course, they could recognize the Buddha. Buddha is not ordinary. Buddha is extraordinary. And then when people look upon the Buddha, faith arises in them due to their past karma. They've learned a lot about the Buddha. They've learned about the characteristics of the Buddha. When they see the Buddha, they recognize the Buddha. That is different. They are probably Buddhists in many, many lives. They are Buddhists. So, it is useful, even the pariyati, the wisdom, pariyati, true learning, it is also useful, it is also necessary. Don't say that it's not important, that it's not necessary. It is also very, very useful. Just this knowledge could help you. Without this knowledge, it will not help you along the right path. Okay, time's up. I will continue more explanation on the marks, the signs, the characteristics of concentrated mind, and it helps you to understand what a concentrated mind is and what a non-concentration mind is. Any question for tonight?